Hello everyone and welcome back to Ruby Lessons in Codecademy. So in the last lesson we were looking at a few tips and tricks that we can use in Ruby to make our programming easier, or how Ruby makes the interpreting process easier. So today we're going to be again looking at something similar, so knowing what to use. So how to be more efficient in your programming, or how to write less code, basically. So sooner or later you're going to need to perform a repetitive task in your program, such as repeating things, looping things, iterating things. Many programming languages allow you to do this with a for loop. Python does. Python also allows you to use a while loop. C++ allows you to use a while loop. I do think that C++ does have its own for loop as well. And while Ruby does include for loops, there are better tools available to us. If we want to do something a specific number of times, so in Python you would do something like for n in range 3, which would do something 3 times. Here you can use the dot times method, like so. So if you wanted to 5 dot times puts O delay, you have 5 is how many times, then you have dot times, and then what you want to do, you have it in a block. And we have discussed blocks quite a few lessons ago actually. If we want to repeat an action for every element in a collection, we can use the dot each. So with dot each, we have used it many times before, but let's recap. Dot each, it requires the block again, and in the block you also need to have a new variable, like an iteration variable. In this case they're calling it x, and what's going to happen is that x is going to become each of the values inside of the array in turn. So x is going to be 1 the first time around, then 2, then 3. And therefore what's going to be printed out, or puts out, whatever you want to call it, is going to be 10, 20, 30, because we're multiplying it by 10 each time. So instructions, let's get a little inventive. Write a loop that only puts the even values of my array. Bonus points if you use a one-line if. Okay, I don't know. Oh, right. The one-line if, we learned that, I think, in the first part of this section. So let's do write a loop, so any loop, let's do my array, and I will do dot each, because that's the easiest thing to do. I will do number, because it makes sense. And then we want to do, so the block, if number is evenly divisible by 2. So we do that like this, with 0. And then we have the, then I believe it was, we want to do, just want to put, okay, we want to put number. And okay, I don't think that we should have that there. Oh, I can't remember how to do that, 1 second. So if you want to make it a one-line if, then we make it we put it to make it, we make it look like English. So we do puts this if that, and this is going to work. Also, there is a simpler way to do this whole operation, which is just doing if number dot even question mark. Remember that question marks in Ruby normally mean it returns a boolean, which is the case with this. So this returns a boolean. Number.even returns a boolean depending on whether the number is even. So if it's true, if it is an even number, it is going to return true. And that's why we get the exact same result like this and like this. So it depends on preference. I don't know how much more efficient one is than the other. I do believe that they're the exact same efficiency. I looked at this link to find that, and yeah. So moving on. Up the down staircase, okay. If we know the range of numbers we'd like to include, we can use the dot up to and dot down to. So this is a much more Ruby-ish solution than trying to use a for loop that stops when a counter variable hits a certain value. Okay, so if you were going to use a while loop to stop until something meets the value of another value, Then in other programming languages you would use a while loop, as I said when I started the statement, but in Ruby you can use the .up to or .down to. So if you were going downwards, you would use a while loop that decreases and compares. If you're using up to in another language, you would do a number that increases, increments, and compares. But here you can just use up to and down to. So we might use .up to print out a specific range of values. So 95 .up to 100. We have num, print num, and also space so that it separates the numbers. So what this is going to do is start at 95 and end at 100. So the end point is the parentheses, and the start point in this case is going to be 95, which is before the dot. And we can use .down to do the same thing with descending values. So you would do something like 100 .down to 95 if you wanted to do the reverse of this. So do you think .up to and .down to work on the alphabet? Only one way to find out. Oh, okay, that's quite interesting. So use .up to put the capital letters L through P. Okay. So up to, right? Up to, yep, okay. L .up to P. There we go. And then we do the block. We do letter, and we can do print letter, comma, with the space in between. So this is just going to, well, what we're expecting it to do is print all of the letters between L and P. And we get LMNOP. It looks like you didn't print out L using puts. Make sure you're using capital letters. I'm pretty sure I am. So instead of the print, we are supposed to have a puts there. And also, along with that, we just delete that and we get that. If you wanted to get the alphabet, you could just do A to Z or Z, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And what this could be useful for maybe is having a dictionary. So you have all of the letters and you can add all of the letters separately to a dictionary, and you could make your own dictionary if you really wanted to do that. Also, seeing as they haven't showed the down to method, it doesn't work with letters. So the down to method does not work with letters. I have tested it. Excuse me. But it is going to work with numbers. So I'm going to do 10 down to 1. And here it's supposed to be num, just to make it look better. And there we go. So we're getting the numbers from 10 to 1 in descending order. Let's put that back as it's supposed to be. Oh, that's not how it's supposed to be. There we go. Good, moving on. I did that just to show you that it is possible to do the down to as well, and they just didn't include it for some reason. That was weird. Call and response. So Ruby is less concerned about what kind of thing an object is and only really cares about what method calls it responds to. So remember when we mentioned that symbols are awesome for referencing method names? While .respond to question mark indicates a boolean value that is going to be returned, takes a symbol and returns true if an object can receive that method and false otherwise. So for example, if we have an array 1, 2, 3, .respond to push, where push is a symbol, this would return true, since you can call .push on an array object. However, if you were to do this, .respond to sim, then it would return false, since you can't turn an array into a symbol. So you can turn this into a, you can do push to these, but you can't do symbol to these. So we're just checking whether something can happen. So basically what .respond to question mark does is checks whether you can do a certain thing to a certain object, where an object is any variable that you might have. So in this case the variable is an array of 1, 2, 3. And you're checking whether you can do push to the elements of that array. In the second, you're case, you're checking whether you can turn this array into a symbol. Well, in the first case, you can't push these elements into another array, but in the second case, you can't turn the array into a symbol, which is why you get a false, and why in the first case you get a true. I can't think of any specific examples right now. However, so think of something like you had. Let's think about where this might be useful actually. Say you wanted to get the user's input of a number. You wanted to check whether that input was a number less than 9. How would you go about doing that? You can't compare a string to be less than 9. That will give you an error. So what you would have to do is check whether, first of all, that's a string. If it isn't, then you move on to converting it into a number, which you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't do the first step. Because if it is a string that contains numbers, you could. If it is a string that contains letters, then you couldn't. And this is why in some cases this would come in useful. You would check whether you could do turn to number on that string. And if you couldn't, you would just re-prompt the user to enter a number. But if you could, then you would just continue with your steps. And this is a case where this might come in very handy. So our instructions, rather than checking to see if our age variable is an integer, check to see if it will .respond to the .next method. So .next will return the integer immediately following the integer it's called on, meaning for .next will return 5. So this should return 27 if it was going to be able to be called for this method. So let's do age.respond to question mark, and then inside we have .next. So oops, the next is on the wrong side, and it's not nest, it's next. There we go. And because it is an integer, we are saying that it can respond to it. So that's good. However, if we were going to make it a string, then that should return false. Oh. Okay, so maybe it's just not wanting us to do this. I'm guessing that this is just an error from Codecademy. This should normally return false because we wouldn't be able to call next unless you can do it on strings as well. Which is why this might actually be returning true. That's probably the most likely case. Let's do age.next and see what that gives us, just for the fun of it. Okay, yeah. So K, and then the last part gets changed to an H instead of a G. So yes, you can call next on a string. What if we were to make it a symbol? Oh, you can still call next on that. Okay, interesting. So you can call next on many things. Okay, that did not go according to plan, but yeah, you can't call next on age because age is an integer. Let's just go with that for now. That should be fine. So moving on, being pushy. So speaking of pushing to arrays, Ruby has some nice shortcuts for common method names. So as luck would have it, one is for .push. So instead of typing out the .push method name, you can simply use lesser than, the concatenation operator, also known as the shovel. Oh, that's weird, I've never heard of that name. To add an element to the end of an array. So if this was your array, you could do shovel 4, and you get the array of 1, 2, 3, 4 with the 4 added on. So good news, it also works on strings, so you can do the exact same thing on strings. Because this is the concatenation, if you were to concatenate them, it's like adding them together, and it does that. In most programming languages, however, I believe including Ruby, you can just use the plus operator, and it gets overloaded, I believe was the word. So it checks whether, first of all, it can add them as integers. If it can't, then it checks whether it can add them as strings, and then it gives an error. If it can add them as strings, it concatenates them, which means sticks the two strings together, which is what we get in this case. I'm not sure whether the plus would work. Oh yeah, okay, pluses do work as well. Okay, so you can either use the plus or the shovel operator in Ruby. That's quite useful to know. Update the code in the editor to use the concatenation operator instead of .push and plus. So as you can see, a giraffe surrounded by wizards, and what we can do there is also do this. So it's just another way of doing concatenation, basically. There we go. And we get the exact same results, a giraffe surrounded by wizards. I don't know why they have spelled it like that. Maybe it's a quote from another film. I have no idea. I'm not going to dwell into it. I'm just going to move on. String interpolation. So you can always use plain old plus or shovel to add a variable value into string. So drink equals espresso, I love plus drink. I'll notice the space there to space out the words if you need it. And that gives you I love espresso. I love shovel drink, then it gives you the same result. But if you want to do it for non-string values, you have to use the .toS to make it a string first. So if you had age equals 26, 26 is an integer. It can't stick to strings. It just doesn't work because there are different types of objects. Therefore, what you have to do is convert it to a string first of all. And basically anything can be converted to a string. And in this case, you get age to be as a string. So what it's going to do is put quotation marks around it in a simplified way, and then stick it onto this. Similar thing with the concatenation shovel operator, you get that. And in this case, it's going to be a string, so you can't treat it to add values to it. So if you were to do 26 as a string plus 2, it would give you an error because 2 is an integer and 26 is a string. So what I'm talking about is something like this, 26 plus 2. If you were, however, going to do plus 2 like this, then what you would get is 262. So 262 as a string. So be careful of things like this. You might make a slip in programming. Just be careful, make sure to keep them the same things, so the same object types, otherwise you might get something unexpected. If you were expecting 28 and you got 262, you might be quite confused because those have a massive difference in between them. So something to consider. This is complicated, and complicated is not the Ruby way. A better way to do this is with the string interpolation. The syntax looks like this. So we have I love, and then we have the drink, where drink is going to be espresso, apparently. And I am age years old. So age, in this case, this is actually going to be an integer. But because you're using the string interpolation, you can't just do it like this. Put it in between curly braces and the pound symbol, or hashtag, or whatever you want to call it. And if you do this, it doesn't matter what kind of a name, what kind of a object type it is. It's always going to work, unless it's... I'm not sure whether symbols would work, but I guess we can test it out right now. So remove the concatenation operator and rewrite the code using .thing. .thing? No, okay, curly braces thing. That's quite simple to do. We just remove that, and we remove that. And we can even get to keep the spaces in this case, like this. I don't want 2 spaces though. Okay, and was there anything else we need to do? No. Okay, good. Now let's test it out for as a symbol. Thing is going to be espresso. I want to make that a symbol. And I want to remove that quotation mark. There we go. As you can see, we actually do get the same thing. And that is because symbol can also be converted into a string, apparently. I'm pretty sure that anything can be converted into a string. It's quite a good thing. And yeah, so if you have any questions about this lesson, do feel free to ask in the comments down below. Other than that, please give me a like, share and subscribe. It encourages me to make more videos. So until next time, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.